Hello, we are re-recording the webinar presented on August 15th. We had some technical difficulties that made sound quality challenging, and so we are re-recording a more brief version without the audio distractions for those who could not join or who wanted to listen again in a less distracted format. So just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this. Although the original webinar was a full 2 hours, this is going to be significantly more abbreviated. This is Amelia Frank Meyer speaking, the CEO of Alia, and I'm going to walk you through some of the slides about the presentation today and do my best to recreate some of our discussion. The first thing I want to do is to introduce Team Alia. Alia is a nonprofit organization located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. However, we serve a national group of systems and leaders who are focused on systemic change in child welfare. Alia was born out of the Innovation and Systems Change arm of A New Family Services, and after about 30 years of trying, learning, failing, and succeeding in attempts to get better outcomes for kids we serve, we decided that it was time to go to a broader approach to this work and help systems to do this work and scale that rather than one child, one family at a time. Like you, we had a growing sense of urgency and the need to do more faster for kids to create better outcomes. So back in 2016, the A New Family Services Board agreed to launch Alia to work with systems and leaders in order to promote systemic change in child welfare. So we have, for the past several years, under that umbrella of ANEW, been working with agencies across the country, demonstrating how to develop workforce well-being and stabilize the workforce, how to engage families and communities with youth and care, and how to stabilize and get significantly better permanency outcomes for youth who weren't able to live safely at home, as well as to support the healing of trauma for youth and out-of-home care. Even though we had successes and won a fair amount of innovation awards, we knew that we only had a piece of the puzzle and that, in fact, other people had other significant pieces of the puzzle as well. And so we began to plan a national child welfare redesign meeting, bringing together thought leaders from around the country to work together to reimagine the child welfare system, believing that our kids deserved better. The Alia Board of Directors comes from all over the country, and they bring expertise inside and outside of child welfare. Our board is growing, and we will have some additional faces soon, so stay tuned for that. But really have been working with a group of innovators who are interested in child welfare systems reform throughout the country. Today we're just going to walk through some of these ideas of who is Alia, which I've talked about a little bit for those of you who aren't familiar with us, but also to explain the 10 of 10 for kids convening, to explain what happened at the 10 of 10, what happens when you bring 100 innovators together to reimagine child welfare, some of our learning and outcomes from that event, as well as the big ideas that were produced during that time with the help of our 100 innovative designers. We'll also talk about what's next and ways that you can stay involved in this idea of transforming child welfare in our country. So Alia is really rooted in our values of courageous partnerships. We don't believe we have all the answers and want to work in courageous partnership with other organizations who are doing similar work, but really are focused on aligning efforts around the country so that we're not all having our efforts be on our own or siloed, but that we get better traction when we work together. We really have a sense of urgency around what our children need to thrive and our need to create systems and ways of working that reduce childhood trauma and increase their ability to thrive. We think about ourselves as fearless innovators. We make mistakes, we try, we risk, but really step into this with the same kind of passion we would if children that we loved would need us to figure this out. And another value is audacious optimism. We just have so much hope and belief in the system being able to be better when we work together. And we are committed to a relentless pursuit of evidence. So we work with evaluation partners, as we did throughout the 10 of 10 convening and in our demonstration projects, as well as partnerships with academia and others to make sure that we do what works, but do it in a way that has a bias towards action, that we don't wait years and years to have things put into the evidence base, but we try, we measure, we adjust, and we try again until we get it right, using the best evidence available to us at the time from many different sources. So as you saw from our values, we believe that our children deserve better, and it's urgent that we figure out a better way to do the work that is a way that results in you thriving and not one that results in 670,000 children spending time out of the home every year, as it is the case in this country with a $30 billion industry. We believe those resources could be better used to prevent trauma and support families, and we are working diligently with others who believe like we do to figure out ways to bring this kind of transformation into systems. At Alia, one of our core philosophical beliefs comes from the famous innovator Buckminster Fuller, who says, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So we are builders, not fighters. We are really interested in considering, as we did at the 10 of 10 convening, what do youth need to thrive and how do we build that, rather than how do we fix a broken system. And so thinking about the idea of how do we approach the challenge from identifying how we build what's needed. If you think about this in an example of telephones, there wasn't a big campaign to get rid of landlines. Instead, people built cell phones which worked better and were more functional, that people could get better efficiency and effectiveness out of and more enjoyment from. And so they just started to use those because it worked better, which obsoleted the existing model of landlines. They just slowly started to fade away. People stopped paying to have landlines because cell phones work so much better. So how do we build something that works better for kids and really put our energy and resources into that? As we began to tackle this problem, we became familiar with an organization, a global human-centered design firm called IDEO. IDEO is based in the Bay Area and works all over the world with very complex and innovative companies like 3M and Apple and many others to help them design new ways of doing things and new ways of thinking. And we thought about bringing IDEO in as a partner to help us to design and reimagine child welfare and a different way of doing the work. Coupled with that was our attendance at the Aspen Ideas Festival, which is a gathering that happens annually in Aspen, Colorado, of thought leaders from around the country and sometimes around the world who come together to really noodle on and think about big ideas that solve population level problems, such as childhood trauma. And so that's really what the 10 of 10 ended up being, was this idea of marrying the human-centered design approach, which is what do kids need to thrive and how do we build that, with the idea of 100 innovators from around the country coming together to help solve this problem. So with the 10 of 10 for kids, we had hundreds of applicants from 35 states in the District of Columbia apply to be designers in this event. It's called 10 of 10 because there were 10 groups of 10 kinds of people. We had 10 innovators who we added as designers from counties, 10 state innovators, 10 federal and tribal innovators, 10 nonprofit innovators, 10 people from philanthropy, 10 child specialists like the American Academy of Pediatrics sent some pediatricians and others who were educators or people like that who had specialty in child serving areas. some outside innovators who had just never heard of child welfare or foster care, didn't know anything about it, but who came with an outside perspective of innovation and a proven history in entrepreneurship. Other people who came for the 10 of 10 were people with lived experience. We had initially thought we would have one group of 10 there, but 40% of our applicants had lived experience and many crossed over. So folks who had lived experience were also innovators in state systems. And so we ended up with the actual, out of the 100 designers, more than 30% had lived experience in the child welfare system. We also had a group of innovation fellows who were Ashoka fellows, Bush fellows, MacArthur fellows, and others. And then our facilitators. So we're there one of each of these kinds of people at each table of 10, hence the name 10 of 10, 10 tables of 10 kinds of innovators for kids. Our partner for this event was the Brave New Workshop, who is a comedy theater, actually an improv theater located in Minneapolis. It's the oldest operating improv theater in the nation, and they really work on mindset shifts. Their owner and leader and another person on their staff wrote a book on shifting mindsets, and they offered as an early adapter to give us their space to host the 10 of 10 for kids, and that's where we hosted the event in May of 2017 in Minneapolis, where these 100 innovators and the most highly qualified volunteers you've ever met came together to help reimagine and redesign child welfare. Our partners at IDEO put together a 3-day event. We had a kickoff on day 0, but the actual design days were day 1, 2, and 3. On day 1, we worked on inspiration and opportunities, where we had activities designed to help the designers develop empathy, to understand who were they designing for. They had worked with information about what it was like to be in the system, and we had different personas developed for them to understand that experience. And so day 1 was really getting the juices flowing about the urgency and understanding the need. Day 2, then, we took that passion, we took that heaviness of what the system does to relationships, to children, and to families, and used that as inspiration to create and generate radical ideas on ways to create change. And as we did that, in the human-centered design process, folks went from talking about ideas to make it different, to putting it down on Post-it notes and laying it out, to then creating prototypes with things like, Skittles and modeling clay, as you see in the picture that will be next, about a remote control as part of a prototype. So really fashioning it out in rudimentary ways, to then creating pitch videos where they videotape to try to explain to others what their prototype might be. We divided the 10 tables of 10 into groups of 3 or 4 and ended up with 30 groups of innovators who produced 30 prototypes from there. And on the last day, we focused on voting on those prototypes. Which ones did we think were the ones that had the most potential and innovation behind them, as well as trying to develop guiding principles that would help us to know if the next set of approaches met the criteria that we wanted to meet. You can see from this slide that there was a lot of activity, and the groups were hard at work, very dedicated at trying to figure out how do we move forward in making sure that we reimagine this differently. The groups were broken up into groups working on prevention, groups working on permanency, groups working on transition, and a group working on workforce well-being issues, workforce stability. And so these groups help to design solutions in each one of these areas of practice in the system. And that is what they did. You'll see on the video that every group did a prototype launch video. So this is just a sample of a video that describes what one group's idea of how to reimagine the system would be.
Hello, we are Team Find My Family. I'm Scooter.
I'm Callie.
I'm John.
I'm Gauri.
I'm Samantha.
We learned
that for youth to thrive, they need to be loved and supported as they are in the space that they live.
Our inspiration is Jose and youth like him, who have been in multiple foster homes and have never found their true match.
So now we're going to take a look at our innovative tool, Find My Family.
I'm here for my visit. I filled out this thing.
Awesome. Okay, so the next step will be for you to swipe through and select the families that you want to get to know. Then you can open the chat feature and we'll set up a time together to meet them. After that, we'll go meet them. I'll be with you the whole time. Awesome. And then the fourth step and the most important step is that you give me honest feedback about whether or not you want to move forward with the match.
I get to tell you about that.
You bet. This tool finally puts Jose in the driver's seat. Find My Family makes this family the last family in a long line of homes.
I'm Chuck.
Alicia, Lynn, Priscilla,
Jamie.
and we're Transition Team 2.
Great.
My name is Sarah. My 1-year-old daughter, Monica, was just removed from me yesterday. I am angry, confused, and ashamed. I want my baby back. I don't know where to get help. I feel so lost. I will get her back by her next birthday.
Right now, there's no community of support around for moms like Sarah. To recruit volunteers to coach her, we're going to infiltrate the Super Bowl halftime show.
I'm an audience member, and I'm unaware of how I can help struggling moms. Wow, it's halftime.
I'm Joe Football. We're here to infiltrate the halftime Super Bowl show. We're looking for volunteers from across the country. Go to www.connect with us. We need safe connections for folks like Sarah. We're looking forward to seeing you out in the community helping.
Wow, that was really convincing. I want to volunteer now.
Because of this effort, thousands of people have signed up to help. To help Sarah meet her goal, we connected her with a parent coach who was at her side for the next 8 months as she navigated the life challenges, allowing her to be a better parent. This is radical because we are focusing on assisting the birth parent and reaching a national audience through the Super Bowl halftime show, advertising to connect with those who never thought of volunteering before.
As a result of parents being mentored, 90% of children are able to return home in less than 1 year compared to the national average of 19 months today.
Hi, this is our team and my name is Jeremy.
Karen.
Ann, Susan,
Liz.
Hi, I'm Jose. I'm 17 years old and next year I'm going to emancipate from foster care. But I really want to reconnect with my family. At the same time, I don't want to leave my foster family behind.
I'm Jose's case manager. I'm meeting with the camp director for Camp Connections. I sent you Jose's information last week, and I want you to tell me a little bit about the plans. I know he wants his dad, best friend, and foster mom to come. What else?
Well, I'm Camp Director Debbie, and we've already reached out to them. You guys are going to be with us for 5 to 7 days. We've got clinicians, motivational counselors, social workers, volunteers, all kinds of people that are going to build a system of support around them. And we're going to do supplemental pay for his dad for taking off work, and we even have incentives for the employer for letting him go.
And the radical idea is that we are bringing birth families, foster families, and youth together to build meaningful connections. This is a place where we are valuing the relationship that a young person has with their birth family, and it values and supports the connections that youth want.
We see a future where young people are able to build those connections, to have support upon exiting care, and that support is strong and lasts a lifetime.
Camp Connect, building a circle of support around Jose and other young people.
Yay!
Yay!
There's also a more brief version of the convening. It's maybe 3.5 minutes that our friends at Think of Us did to summarize the convening and what that meant like for people. And so that's available for you to watch as well.
We are in a room filled with people who've had lived experiences in the realm of foster care. And so it is really intense to be a part of a design group where people represent pretty much every cog in this current system, and by putting all of these people together to reimagine an entirely new process, it is equal parts daunting and exciting.
It's been very exciting to see people who have experience in human services come and talk about the child welfare system, but also the independent sort of outside thinkers come in with their thought process about the child welfare system and how we can take what private sector has done, what other NGOs, what other nonprofits, other agencies have done, and integrate it into solutions that really help children and outcomes for those children.
The biggest aha moment is that we are going to redesign. We're not going to change, we're going to redesign. And I think the whole semantics on that make people want to go forward thinking.
It's actually a really innovative approach to a really difficult conversation, so I find it to be really enlightening. It actually is a little overwhelming as well. We're getting a lot of stuff accomplished, having a lot of communication with a lot of very solid individuals who have some really good input.
I think one of the biggest challenges is respecting our own lived experience while at the same time letting go of that lived experience to imagine what it could be.
And not every part has been comfortable, right? And not every part has had everybody agreeing by any means. So are those special moments when people are disagreeing? Well, sorta. But when they add up with those epiphany moments and with the really constructive moments, they come together for a very strong experience.
So really what's happened is they're really cultivating a positive energy which allows us to be transparent and fluid with all of our ideas without expecting or being judged. So that open dialogue has really helped us all grow a little bit here.
I'm looking to be in the same car with everybody going in the same direction, and I think that's what's going to happen is we are all going to integrate the best of our experience and the best of our wisdom and the best of our interests to make this redesign happen.
Throughout the course of the convening, we identified what we call tensions. So no right or wrong, but just as many people or a lot of people weighed in on both sides of these. We talked about creating an environment that was both safe and uncomfortable, and for sure we got uncomfortable. The process of change, especially with so many folks who have really vivid experience in the system, is a hard one. It's a challenging one, and we got messy, and there were really some very tough moments of challenge that we needed to push through and say yes, and yes, it's hard. Yes, there are differing points of view. However, despite strong opinions on both sides of an issue, we still have an obligation to do this better for kids. So the tensions were folks feeling like everyone needed to be included and other folks feeling like we just need to get to consensus and maybe some people can't get there. There were tensions around we should really focus more on voices with lived experience and others saying, no, we need to focus on professionals who understand the impact of the system. Some folks feeling like we needed to really just move on and focus about the child welfare system and changing that, and others who really wanted to change bigger concepts around to talk more about things like poverty and how that impacted things and how could we possibly change child welfare if we didn't fix poverty first. Others who talked about the family as the core, and others who thought the child welfare system really needed to serve as the core safety net for kids. And other folks who wanted to talk about what the system is like now and the challenges now, and others who wanted to talk more about the future state of what it could be. There was a tension between how do we really honor people's pain and move forward to create a better experience for others. Some people feel that the system is irreparably broken. Some feel that it's functioning fine. And so all these tensions arose, and we sat in there and let people have their space to feel both sides of this, but also were challenged to do that while we still continued to reimagine what it could be like. We really gathered just so much information from people. We had evaluations, a professional program evaluator who had points of evaluation from everyone who was there in the beginning, the middle, and the end, and we combed through these and coded these, and we also had more than 30 meetings in the weeks just immediately after the convening, and began to rewatch the prototype videos and code them. We hosted a listening session because we felt like there was still more for us that we didn't have time to do in the 3.5 days, and really tried to hear what people were saying there, as well as the many emails, cards, letters, and follow-up communication we got, to try to include all of this in putting it all into the pot and deciding, what is this all saying to us? What are we really hearing here? And one of the things that we heard were some lessons learned. One is that trust building at the beginning of any change process is just critical. Change is scary and it's tough, and you need to be able to understand people's motivations and to feel like they are there for the right reasons and understand who they are, what their skin is in the game. And we had done a lot of build up with the 10 of 10 with emails every week to the designers, but it was clear some designers came without that pre-information and or needed more time and trust building with each other at their table or their groups of designers. And so really just can't say enough about taking the time that it takes to build trust at the beginning. We also really felt like we had a theme of race and poverty come up very, very strongly, and that needed a place that was more explicitly articulated in the beginning, and a way for us to have a conversation about this as we put that in context in the change process. So the work of change is hard, and it can get messy and scary, and it can trigger people, especially when you have that many people with lived experience in a setting. And what we know about adverse childhood experiences is at least 2/3 of the room had experienced some of them. And we did general trigger warnings, but we did not do explicit trigger warnings. And we really felt like that was something we learned in hindsight that we missed, that doing really specific trigger warnings is very important as you're talking through this whenever possible. And that really, no matter what's stated in a general way, that making sure that if there's anything that you do that helps people to build empathy, it's important to talk through the motivation for that and to prepare people properly. We also learned that it's really hard. People find it challenging to radically reimagine a system that they're part of, and they needed lots of encouragement and support to think bigger. As we began to look through the themes of the prototypes, we saw that many of them began to attend to certain themes, and not only in what they were trying to solve, but in how they were trying to solve problems. And so these are the themes that really came forward in so many of the prototypes, which were, whatever solution is developed, it must include immediate real-time needs. So people can't wait. It's urgent. And when your family's in crisis, you need somebody now. When your child is in danger or a child's in danger, you need somebody now. And so immediate real-time needs need to be met. And there needs to be community involvement of individuals. How do we make this a larger community problem of bringing in resources and supports of individuals in the community who are locally available and sourced? The other themes that we saw were that there's a lot of people who have resources to offer and a lot of people who need resources, but there's not really a good way of connecting the two. And so finding ways to to bring together the knowledge of what needs people need as well as the access to those needs. And people talked about this as being locally sourced. So in grocery stores and laundromats and places where people are, libraries, just easily accessible connection to resources. A really huge theme was the idea of whole family support. So it's not enough just to support youth or to remove youth from the home, but really looking at the entire family, that what children need to thrive is for their parents to be okay, and so we need to scaffold and support the whole family. Another piece was around community involvement of businesses and other systems in the community that really framing this problem not as a child welfare system problem, but really as a community problem, as all of our problem, and what role, can everyone play, that we all have to do something. And consistency of services, so this idea of families not having to bounce back and forth between several service providers or have multiple relationships, but really the idea, if you think of a one-stop shop relationship, that there's someone they can count on and build trust with. And then the last one is consumer-driven or consumer choice. And another way to say that in this case is family-driven, that it's not strengths-based or family-based, but driven. So how do we ask people what they need in order to thrive and help them to secure that? A big theme from the 10 of 10 convening was this idea of we need to get way further upstream. We need to do so much more prevention, look at building protective barriers rather than hiring more ambulance drivers. So if you look at the picture, the cars just keep coming and coming. And in our current system, we talk a lot about, there's so many kids, there's so much need, there's so much trauma. How do we get more people who can do TFCBT? How do we get more people who can take care of these kids? And really, the conversation has got to be, how do we prevent these kids from needing the ambulance? And how do we prevent these families from falling off the cliff and attend to things much, much earlier? So that was a very predominant theme as well. When we looked at all of this, all the themes and the prototypes and the evaluations and the listening sessions, and brought things together, what we realized was we didn't really come up with one single silver bullet big idea, that our hopes of finding and imagining a better way did not really fulfill themselves in a single way of responding to the need. And possibly it's because we set out to do an impossible task, which was we set out to create a better system than the one that every child on this planet is born into, which is their family. And there is no better system than a functioning, resilient family. It is exactly what children need to thrive. And any attempts to create an artificial system to replace that have significant shortcomings. And so we began to talk about the idea of an unsystem. So the big idea that came out of the convening through all of the information and themes was that, in fact, the system has gotten large and bureaucratic and lays on top of the natural system of the family. So when the family's not functioning well, there's additional requirements, additional shame and blame, and sometimes punishment and additional disruption that happens, rather than finding ways to come underneath the family to support them back to functioning resilience and health. And as we begin to try to create this artificial system to replace the natural system, we can never get it quite as right. And so if you think about a similar idea, you think about what's happened with food in this country, and really around the world. In the 60s, Hamburger Helper became, or processed meals and foods like Hamburger Helper became really popular, that we wanted to do it faster and more efficiently, and we could create these ready-made meals. Farmers began to use herbicides and pesticides so they could grow and plant more food on smaller plots of land, and we could do it more efficiently. We genetically engineered and modified our food so that it could come just like we liked it. And what happened was that as we got further and further away from the natural source of food, from the organic whole food and locally sourced farm-to-table movement, as we began to use these other artificial things, what we realized was that, in fact, it made us sick, right? This artificial attempt to recreate something natural was not working. And now you see people going back to non-GMO, whole foods, organic foods. Where did my food come from? Locally sourced food. Because it is, in fact, food is, as it comes whole, near perfect. And when we try to recreate an artificial version of it, we don't do well, and we become ill. And the same is true when we try to artificially recreate relationships or families or systems supporting children, that what children need most to thrive is healthy, safe, secure, nurturing, permanent connections to their family whenever safely possible. And when it's not safely possible, how do we support the family back to safely possible so that that fundamental primal need of being connected to family is possible? And so, we believe that the way to get to this is in shifting mindsets, that we believe when you see things differently, it's impossible to keep doing the same thing. And even our most innovative people who want to do this kind of innovation, who want to have family driven, who want to significantly reduce the number of children living in systems that we've created for them and not safely with their families, that we're not willing to put the supports in to create safety in families, or able to do it in some cases. We believe that when you see this differently, it's really impossible to keep doing it the same way. But even if you're innovative and you try to do it, that the system, the public system, and the public community is not yet caught up with some of the ideas of what we know in our system around what trauma does to kids, what disconnection does to kids. And so it all in well-meaning, well-intentioned, that there is community pressure to keep kids physically safe, and not with regard to the emotional and psychological safety, not with regard to the importance of connections to people who they know and love or to whom they're related. And so really looking at this idea of needing to shift the public mindset so that they can support shifts in practice. And that would be, what our judiciary does, and how our police respond, and how our public child welfare responds, and how the community pressures public child welfare systems who want to do this kind of work in a different way, but don't have community support to do it. So instead of tackling first policy and funding, how do we work within the current policy and funding to shift the mindset? Because when people understand the importance of what kids need to thrive, then the others follow. During the webinar, we did have some people talk about their experience at 10 of 10 and how that's continued to impact them. And so in summary, Elizabeth Black, who's the Director of Child Welfare at the Center for Support of Families and the Alia Vice Chair, talked about her experience at 10 of 10, where she met an individual who she spent time talking with about what he really needed to help his family thrive. And her real takeaway was how hard it was to stay present in that conversation and to let this gentleman tell them what he needed, that she was, even after all of her years in child welfare, really wanted to move through the activity of, she was assigned in building empathy at 10 of 10 to meet someone's need, and she wanted to buy him a cup of coffee and be done. But the patience that her partner in this activity, Peter Hutchinson, took to just stay present with him and really dig down to the core of what do they need to thrive, and then help meet that need, and how important it is to take the time to build that trust, to engage with people, and to let them drive their need. Jerry Milner, who's the current Associate Commissioner at the Children's Bureau, who is acting in the role of helping shape so much of our nation's child welfare work right now, was also a designer at 10 of 10 event. And Jerry just talked about that shift in thinking that really was pronounced at 10 of 10 for him, about how we have just got to start talking about earlier upstream prevention and integrate that into all of our work as a frame. Dr. Pastrano talked about how he also was a 10 of 10 designer, and the idea of how we create collective impact together, and his shift in thinking. As he has mentioned before, he feels like he's been struggling on this idea of how do we create this population level shift, and he feels like he's been struggling alone, but found really his people at 10 of 10 who are focused on creating transformative change with collective impact. Chuck Price and Shannon Kelly of Waupaca County. Chuck was a designer and Shannon Kelly was the volunteer coordinator for the 10 of 10 event. And they talked about their transformation in the county to trauma-informed care, and really how at 10 of 10, they became connected with other people who were trying to make these systems level changes as well, and their dedication to doing this in a different way. And in their county, have no kids in residential care, have substantially changed their investments in out-of-home care and move that funding to the front-end prevention services, and just their real commitment to having no child in Waupaca County placed with a stranger, and what that looks like to execute that. And then Corey Best really working to share with us his stories of family engagement and making sure that we include families as key driving stakeholders, and talking about how that theme emerged at 10 of 10 and how important that is to him and his work and his lived experience in this way as well. And really his commitment to continuing to engage families as change agents. So, really loud and clear, we heard from the 10 of 10 designers, there's just got to be a better way. And we hear this over and over from people who are connecting with us, that there's got to be a better way. And what we want to say back to you all is, and together we will find it. That we don't have all the answers, but we sure as heck aren't going to stop until we, the collective, find ways to do things better on behalf of our kids. So next, I just want to tell you what Alia is doing, and ways for you to jump on the train if you're interested, if this way of thinking and practicing really speaks to you. We're so interested in having you work together with us. So what we're doing is, Alia works in a model of know better, do better, be better, which is we really need to change our mindset around this work, and then in doing better, to design new ways to align existing efforts. We are not reinventing the wheel, but know that we can get better traction when we work together. And we're interested in rapid cycle innovation, so doing demonstration projects in radically different ways, testing, figuring it out, measuring, adjusting, and failing early and failing fast and fixing it is what we're interested in there, with innovative partners who are willing to push that way of doing things in a very different direction. And then be better is this idea that together we're better, that we're interested in partnering to drive innovation, connecting other innovators, activating existing networks, and accelerating change in the field. So this is the way that we work. If you're interested in these kinds of things, these are some of the things that are forthcoming. So we are working with other change makers like you to do things differently, and shifting the mindset. So we intend to do this we're working on a crowdsourced sharing platform where we'll collect innovation ideas. People on the webinar today said, what do you know that's working in prevention? And we're talking about cutting edge innovation that has early promising results, not ones that have gone through the evidence-based practice, which is very important, and we build on the evidence, but we don't have 20 years to wait to get it to the evidence, which is how long it takes us in our field on average to get from research to actual practice. We're also looking at engineering a national platform to raise consciousness about the challenges. Maybe an idea we're noodling on is 100 voices in 100 days of helping people to understand the realities of foster care. So not telling horror stories, but just this is what it's like. Do people, having people raise their sense of urgency about what would be acceptable for their own children. We're also going to be in the future issuing a call for a national forum on radical ideas. So think kind of TEDx forum nationally for innovators in child welfare to share their radical ideas about it. And we are building a wisdom council of experienced and fearless innovators to help us operationalize the how of a new way. Where do we begin for those systems interested in doing this? So these might be near retired or newly retired leaders, or people who are just fearless and not worried about their job security, who want to join in really pushing the envelope with us. We're also launching a trauma-informed leadership certificate with the University of Minnesota School of Social Work in January to help leaders who are interested in changing their organizations to walk through bolstering their own leadership and taking those next steps. Other ways to jump on this train are that we are hosting an open Policy and Finance Unsummit to shift the focus away from how do we need to fund this and change the laws around doing this work, but what can we do right now within existing boundaries and where do we get started? And we are preparing through funding and operationalizing the how to do radical demonstration projects of the Unsummit. So looking for fearless public partners to implement some of this as well. Additionally, we will be hosting virtual learning and operationalizing excuse me, virtual circles that will be topic focused, and they'll meet every other week for an hour for a set period of time where people will noodle on complex problems and help each other to design solutions and hows with a bias towards action in figuring out how to get through to the next step of challenges. And we're also just talking about building this alternative voice in the field, from take the kids away and keep them physically safe to building one not of child welfare, but really of family well-being. So those people that just really believe in the support of families being critical to youth thriving. Our Unsummit is in Minneapolis, and it's October 11th and 12th. And so if you're interested, you can register on our Facebook page for this, and we're interested in people who want to talk about how we get started right now within the existing policy and finance arena. We're also super interested in your big ideas. We know that we only have pieces of this puzzle, and we want to bring together those who have other big ideas here, so we're interested in hearing from you and working with you. You can start by being an evangelist for the Unsystem, professing and sharing the thought that family is not the problem, but family is the solution, and the idea that there is hope, right? It's possible, really, to fundamentally change the child welfare system, that we can do that. So there are places to follow us on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, and sign up on our website at aliainnovations.org. To get information on the Trauma-Informed Leadership Certificate, the circles, and other things. We really wanted to thank our webinar sponsor, Capella University, and the Capital One Foundation, and so many other people who helped us to make the 10 of 10 possible. And we will leave you with this final quote. Together, we are at once the problem and the only possible solution to the problem. And when we say together, we mean you and us and families and kids and all of us together. We humans created so many of the challenges that we're facing, and so we know together we can help solve them, and we know for sure we can't do it without your help. So thanks for your interest. We encourage you to be in touch. We encourage you to share your big ideas too, and we are so thankful to have you on this journey with us.